So the Zags advanced their 9th straight Sweet 16, and that is pretty impressive, the consistency. Again, this was a team, what, a month ago? Are they going to make the NCAA tournament? Not only do they do it, but once again, they're going to the second weekend. See what?
Listen, I was one of those guys. I raised my hand that said life without Drew Timme. What would it be like for the Zags? Mark Few got it done. And the NCAA tournament is all about the draw, right? Think about it. It's all about the draw. You get McNeese, who you think you should beat. Then all of a sudden you get a limping Kansas. Great, great draw. You still have to get it done. But let me just say this. You know, Bill Self, great Hall of Fame coach. John Calipari. Think about it. Who's beaten both the UKs in the same year? Kansas and Kentucky. But the one criticism for both those Hall of Fame coaches, right? Ryan Nembhard was unbelievable. Yeah. But look what he did. 1 for 6 today, 1 for 7 against Kentucky, no threes, and he dominated the game with 12 assists and 9 assists. Why are you not trapping him? Why are you not going, why are you letting him dominate the game? And he dominated both games, and he dominated today. He was the reason, right? We talk about all the other guys, but he was the reason that they dominated that game, and I knew if you couldn't keep him out of the paint, it was going to be tough.
No, to your point, it was a pick-and-roll masterclass led by Nembhard, and at a certain point, you were almost waiting for some type of change in the defense in the sense of it wasn't even just off the straight pick and roll, hit the man, hit the pop. It was the pass out of the pick and roll that now you're attacking because the defense is offset. I mean, you can see why this team is top 10 in offense. They score in such a variety of ways, and it's not from the point guard, but it's the breaking down of everything. They went to a 20-minute span where they didn't miss a consecutive shot. So they make a shot, miss a shot. That's offensive flow. It's contagious. I've been on teams where you just know when you're in that flow. You got a point guard hitting it. Hopefully it was me, the point guard, hitting somebody. I'm like, I'm coming to you next because I know what they're about to do next. Nembhard systematically went through his checks and like, all right, you're going to guard that. Boom. All right, you're going to guard that. And he completely took over the game. There was no adjustments to that made.
And GP, they were down 1 at the break, but didn't you get the sense, and Bill Self kind of alluded to it in the postgame, that Gonzaga was still going to win this game. And, of course, it looks easy now. They outscored them by 22 in the second half.
Yeah, Bill mentioned the word gassed, I think 3 or 4 times in that press conference. Keep in mind, Gonzaga shot 60% from the field against them. Everybody over the past few days has mentioned how Kansas lost its leading scorer. They also lost their best defensive player, and they never had depth. So when you're asking guys in quick turnarounds to play 32, 34, 35 minutes, and you already can't rely on your bench in any sort of meaningful way, well, this was always how this was going to end. And it's just wild to see Kansas get handled like this, except this has been happening over the past 6 weeks. They lost to Texas Tech by 29. They lost to Houston by 30. They lost to Cincinnati by 20, all after Kevin McCullough started limping around. This team had a high ceiling at one point, but once you lost McCullough and it was clear you didn't have a bench, about a round of 32 exit was pretty predictable.
So Gonzaga advances in the Midwest, Arizona advances in the West.
Arizona with the dub.
Deron Holmes, a phenomenal year, but 23 comes at a loss at a double-double. Love 19. Keyshawn Johnson was huge in this one. 13-7, Larson 13-7, 6 assists, 10-point victory. Tommy Lloyd and his guys marching on. How about that, GP?
And this is where we always thought they were going to be, at the very least in the Sweet 16. And now that's 2 times in 3 years as a head coach for Tommy Lloyd. I think most people understand this, but this guy is off to one of the greatest, and I mean absolute greatest starts in Division I men's head coaching history. And now he's, 2 more wins away from possibly taking Arizona to a Final Four in Arizona.
Yeah, they got on him very quickly, and then I don't think Dayton knew what they were getting into early in this game, but they tried to fight back, and they did a good job. Here's my thing, which is amazing. You talk about Arizona. Umar Ballo, transfer from Gonzaga. Keyshawn Johnson, transfer from San Diego State. Jaden Bradley, transfer from Alabama. Caleb Love from USC. Pella Lawson from Utah. That's Arizona basketball. That's college basketball today. Shout out to Tommy Lloyd for putting this group together and getting them going, because they are very good.
Yeah, you mentioned that group, and every championship caliber team has to have certain things. A scorer that can score one-on-one, that's Caleb Love, that you don't know how much he can go up for. A big man down low in Ballo. You have Larson, who Caleb Love called their Army Swiss knife because he just does so many things, that glue type of player. Then you have a bench who, on any given night, Bradley came in here and was a huge spark plug, not just on the offensive end, which is found money if you're Arizona, but on the defensive end, making plays on defense. Every championship team that you look at, not to mention somebody athletic, Johnson. So every championship team that I've seen, they have certain pieces that you need, because when you play against teams, you don't know who's going to perform well. Like we talked about, Caleb Love came out the gate swinging in the first half. Then was quiet a little bit, but it didn't matter because those other pieces started to activate. So Arizona is one of those teams that when you look at their ceiling, there isn't one. They just have to play well. Is
there a way to view Dayton's season, or do we need to let some days go by? Because the A-10, we questioned it all year long. They were the best team, even though they didn't win the A-10. We thought they could go the deepest. We love the job that Anthony Grant has done. He had a phenomenal season in 2020. Didn't get to play in the NCAA tournament. So after the win the other night, I at least came out of it thinking, you know what, maybe this is going to be sort of some redemption for Anthony Grant in this program. So to see it end here, yeah, not a surprise against a 2 seed, but I kind of felt like with Deron Holmes, maybe this could be the type of team that could get an upset like this.
Yeah, there's nothing disappointing about losing in the round of 32 to Arizona. What is disappointing is that you put yourself in a position to have to play Arizona in the round of 32 by getting a 7 seed. This Dayton team at one point in the season looked like, you know, maybe they could compete for a top 3 seed, top 4 seed in the NCAA tournament, but that was going to require them to roll through the A-10. As you mentioned, they didn't even win the A-10. They didn't win the A-10 tournament. I think, broadly speaking, it's a bit of a disappointing season for Dayton, but it ended in a reasonable place given where they were on Selection Sunday.
Let me just say one thing about that. It did, but they lost Malachi Smith 7 minutes into the season, who was projected to be a first-team All-Atlantic 10 guard. And look at the season they still had. At the end of the day, I think it was, like you said, probably a disappointment.
16-point victory in the second round against a blue blood by Michigan State. Yes, Sparty lost a lot of games, but the way Izzo and company looked against Mississippi State, you kind of wondered about this. And then you come out, Michigan State punches them in the mouth. It's 26-14. The Tar Heels respond.
I just wish Wally was here because he picked Michigan State. I love to give him a hard time. But listen, you know, North Carolina is all that, right? They have 2 elite upperclassmen in R.J. Davis and Armando Bacot. But more importantly, they got Cormac Ryan and Harrison Ingram. I mean, 2 big-time transfers that came in and steadied the ship and righted the ship from what happened last year. So if they get in a pinch when R.J.'s not doing it or Armando's not doing it, they got those 2 guys. And that's huge. And I'm happy for Hubert Davis because Carolina, as I said before, it's about expectation. Renee knows that about UConn. At Carolina and Blue with number 23 in the Raptors, they expect, and Dean Smith, they expect to win. This is GP, you know this. This is where they expect to be at Carolina. And then that's what they're doing, is number 1 seed and moving on.
It's starting to look like maybe last season was just an outlier for Hubert Davis. But there were big questions after, you know, being preseason number 1 and then missing the NCAA tournament. But this season, they've been fabulous pretty much from start to finish. And we've got games to go, but I'm not sure we'll see anything more impressive the rest of this day than what we saw from North Carolina. Because when Wally Zerbiak and everybody else is talking about, oh, no, you got to deal with Tom Izzo in the round of 32, and then you go down 12 early, that's scary because that clock is ticking. You're down double digits to a guy who has won as a worst-seeded team in this tournament 17 times in his career. That's the most ever. To respond and not only erase that deficit, but then build yourself a double-digit lead and make no drama in the end, that's great stuff from the Tar Heels.
Yeah, I mean, and to that point, again, if you have championship aspirations, you want to handle games a certain way. A win is a win. Everybody knows a win is a win. But you want to kind of show that we are those dudes. You said they're all that. They showed they're all that, because just saying it at this point in the season, it ain't going to cut it. But North Carolina showed it.
They beat the 7-seed Washington State 67-56, Lipsy 15. Curtis Jones, so tough for that team. He's got 14 to finish out, and double figures for Keyshawn Gilbert as well. It's actually the 6th Sweet 16 all-time for Iowa State. They were there in 2022. So, tell you early on, they start 0 for 9. And we talked earlier, it's better to start hot than not, but Washington State wasn't really able to take advantage. And for much of the game, Iowa State was able to keep them at arm's length, really, Renee.
Yeah, definitely. And it's that Iowa State defense. Look, they've been ranked top 5 nationally for a reason. They take you out of your flow of offense. When you can't explain why a team doesn't necessarily look like themselves, credit the defense, because a team doesn't go out there and just decide not to play their style of play that they did. But Iowa State, you have to give them credit. They didn't shoot amazing, but they shot well enough and they played high-level defense.
I mean, some teams just love playing in the mud, right? I mean, they enjoy it, you know, and Washington State's done a great job this year. Tremendous job by Kyle Smith and his staff of assembling a roster and be able to put them in position. But remember, Iowa State and won the Big 12 tournament championship and doubled up the University of Houston. So this team is accustomed to winning. They finished second in the Big 12. They got the best. Washington State Cougars got the best of the Big 12, the best conference in America, and they showed it today. Yeah,
in a matchup of two second-place teams from conferences, the second-place team from the better conference ended up pulling away in the second half. You never want to miss your first 9 or start 1 of 13, particularly in a high-stakes game. But where you can afford to do it is at a place like Iowa State when you're one of the 2 best defensive teams in the entire country. Again, they were 1 of 13 to start and only down 7 at that point. If you're TJ Otzelberger, you feel great in that moment because you know you're not going to continue to struggle that way on the offensive end. And if Washington State couldn't create real separation at the beginning, then that gap was always going to close.
One final thought on this one?
Final thought is they always say defense travels. And so when you look at these teams that keep on advancing to the next round, they have a lot in common, and that's that the defense is traveling. And Iowa State, they travel and they're moving on to Boston.